Good morning. This is Talking Devils, the leading independent Manchester United podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Barton, joined by Manchester United legend Paul Parker. If you're watching live on YouTube or Facebook, feel free to get your questions and your comments in. If you're watching the replay, say hello, feel free to comment. We do reply. If you're listening back on the audio podcast, please be sure to subscribe, leave a review on the platform you're listening on. Paul, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you very much, Wayne.
Good.
Good.
A bit of a weird podcast this week. Obviously, we're going to talk about the 65th anniversary of Munich in a little while, but we've got to start off talking about Crystal Palace and Manchester United win 2-1. Very eventful game. Very weird game in terms of like the atmosphere got quite ugly in it. More intense than what normally used to seeing, and obviously that had something to do with the refereeing decisions as well. Before we get started, Ben says, Good morning, Ben. Hope you're well. United win 2-1. They score an early penalty. Bruno Fernandes, I don't think there's any doubt with the penalty. The guy's got his arms out. And then I think what happens, what you normally get because there was a big delay as well, maybe like 2 or 3 minutes between the award and the penalty being, the penalty actually being taken and scored. So you've got like that long delay. The only good thing is that VAR in Old Trafford seems to finally have the announcements because, like, for the last sort of 4 or 5 decisions that they've had with VAR, they haven't actually told us like they were even checking it. But they did that. It took about 2 or 3 minutes. Then obviously scores and the game's kind of flat. It's like, what do United do further? I mean, you just see it in games of football, really. It's one of those age-old problems. Palace sort of sniff that they could get back into it. Ten Hag makes a couple of changes where he brings on Garnacho. Garnacho does really well, helping Shaw set up Rashford for the goal. In fact, that's a fantastic team goal. And you think game over. United can see the game out. In the level of comfort that they kind of need at this moment in time. But then there's a melee started on the sideline. Anthony's thrown into the barged into the advertising board, and it starts like this massive sort of riot between the players. It looks like, Anthony and some antagonist, but even if Anthony's the antagonist or whoever nudged him into the boards, they're going to get yellow cards. The referee goes and checks VAR again, and he sends off Casemiro. United then pretty lucky to hold on for a 2-1 win because Palace throw on very tall forwards. They absolutely ball ahead, making it saving. Palace do pull a goal back, but United hold on to win 2-1. And in fact, towards the last 2 or 3 minutes of injury time, they're quite comfortable. They're pushed up and attacking in the left and holding on onto the ball in that area. We'll talk about Casemiro on the red card in a moment, Paul, but all in all, United probably worthy of the win.
Yeah, I think you have to look. Sometimes you know that United are on a tough schedule and everything's ain't going to be great and rosy in a situation. Sometimes a game against Palace, they can be party poopers when they travel away from home to the big boys, and so you just take it. It's as simple as that,
Yeah.
and you grab hold of it, and there is going to be that moment. Palace have got that bit about them that they can sometimes go and nick something. So I think we're going to have to say, really, you call that a good 3 points more than anything, really. That's how you look at it. It's easy to come out and say should have done better against them, but if it means you don't get a great performance in a game like that, and you look at the situation, you just take you take the win. You take the win and you look at it and say, did you justify winning the game? I think we have to say United did justify it. Did they play well? No, not really. But they got through it.
A nice goal as well to win it from Rashford.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, everyone like you just said as you were talking now, that one goes in. You thought the game was won, but it wasn't won at that point. But yes, it certainly made a difference. But if you end up the way that Palace went about it, the skirmish kind of got them going a bit. It kind of, the fans maybe got caught up in that as well. Maybe didn't really go as what they normally do to keep the team going, and they lost their way, lost their you say Palace played it quite well. They cause a skirmish like that, takes everyone's mind away from things, and all of a sudden you lose that momentum, and that's what United done.
I think from my Ben says, I'm glad we don't have to play Palace again, and absolutely, because I think it was getting a bit nasty at the end. And I don't think Andre Marina helped it, to be honest. I think he was confused over the penalty. He obviously missed the penalty the first time round, which, all right, that happens. But he seems to, moving on from the Casemiro thing, no, I'm not saying we're moving on. We're going to talk about it. But I mean, after that decision, he seemed to not lose the plot, but he didn't seem to have control of the game. At one point, he elbowed Fernandes in the head. It didn't stop play. He must have known that his elbow hit Fernandes on the edge. I'm not, Fernandes is quite theatric and he did get up, but he should have stopped play because he's elbowed the player in the head. He's noticed that's an head injury. There was a point where Sabitzer, on for his debut, makes a magnificent tackle. United are through, and he blows for a foul. And there are a couple of decisions like that. He was just thing, but it all stemmed back to the thing. And do you know what? You can forgive some referees because when there is a melee, when it all kicks off, it is difficult to sort of know exactly what's gone on. The problem is he's gone and looked at that video, and we've all seen. The thing is, it's one thing him going to look at the video, but we've all seen the video of what he looks at. And he looks at the worst 3 seconds, and he doesn't even consider the full context. He doesn't look at the full incident. He doesn't look at the full. He doesn't watch it all pan out. He looks at the worst 3. Well, he looks at a specific 3 seconds that paint Casemiro not in the best light. He doesn't even watch that. He doesn't watch that altercation completely unfold. Doesn't watch how it ends, and he sends Casemiro off. And he's going to be banned for 3 games. United run the risk of a frivolous appeal, which would make it 4 games, and that would make him an absentee for the Carling Cup, Carabao Cup final against Newcastle, which obviously United are probably apprehensive to do. It's a bit of a, even though, you or I might think, it's a fair chance of winning that appeal. How much do you trust the appeal process? It's one of those things. I mean, talk me through what you thought of that decision, because I looked at it at the time, obviously didn't know what went on, and then watching it afterwards, it's like, oh my god, how was he being sent off for that?
Well, there we are. I'll take the latter there, exactly the same. And his mind wasn't. It wasn't. I don't think it was about him making his own mind up. I think he was told. He was shown what was needed to show to prove the point of whoever it was who was made the decision he needs to be sent off. Because there's the situation with Fred, with IU, that was proper aggressive. With something like that, the time it went on, you pick out one red shirt and you send them off. When in theory he was holding the shirt, he wasn't an aggressive, round the neck aggressive. You can see him afterwards that it was just a case of him pulling him away. Casemiro's character doesn't show any aggression at all when he plays on his face or anything like that. And sometimes you have to look at people, and he hasn't done that. And how can you pick out him, as said by Ten Hag, and only pick out the one player? It doesn't make sense. So I think there's a case in point with the Fred situation. For the argument is to look at that and look at that. It's both of them or none of them. Make your mind up. Who's the people? Who are these people who are in their little broom cupboard, as I call it, near Heathrow? Why have they gone to him and not gone to IU for his one? Because that was serious aggression. And I've seen IU playing a lot of times, and he is like that. He is quite aggressive. He plays. He's faced. If things ain't going his way, he does get that way. It was just a strange one, and I think there's a point to go and do it because I think the 3 games he's going to miss. As much as you're talking about a final, you're talking about Premier League games, Wayne, and it's important for me. They're in a great position, United, to get really stable in that pack of 4, and something like this, which is minimal, it wasn't a 2-4. I'll tell you what, he's sending off. His second yellow in that game. What game was it? The Palace game.
The yellow that he got.
The yellow he got. The challenge he made, which could have been deemed a red card challenge because both feet are up, was worse than that.
Absolutely, yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So I don't see you're talking about say, oh, it could be an extra game and miss a League Cup final. League Cup finals, great for him to be his first season in the UK to play in the final. But it'd be great. But I think the three games are important, and you want your key players. I really do think they should go for it because there's enough argument there to say why was he sent off when he was more about him trying to control the player and pull him away.
Yeah.
That's
Oh,
me.
yeah.
But it got obviously lawyers, and like you just mentioned at the end there again, Wayne, is that you don't know who's going to be sitting there to make that decision. Because I still say, and it is that way in the way that life is. It's a boys' club,
Yeah.
and that thing's a boys' club, and they'll all protect each other. And Andre Mariner made a massive, massive mistake, and just during that game, like you say, the way he had no control of it. And sometimes I think as a referee, after so long, you can't. It goes. And I think Andre Mariner is in that position now where he might just have to step down from where in the situation is at that level of football.
Yeah. Well, Ben says to play devil's advocate, the angle we get on TV for most decisions, unless VAR is involved, isn't usually the same angle the ref has, and that is fair. But I also think that then you've got to use whatever footage is available to see the full process play out. Because I think obviously there's a second angle that we've seen that's gone viral from a fan in the stands where they're behind it, and you can sort of see from the start of it that what Casemiro's actually doing. He hasn't actually got his hands around his neck, he's got him on his collar, and what he's actually doing. There's the momentum of the situation where he's kind of like, we know what Old Trafford slopes on the pitch. He's kind of holding him, making sure that he doesn't fall down. He's actually helping him out. And at the end, they give each other a hug. Will Hughes turns around after Casemiro gets sent off, puts six fingers up to the crowd, and he's trying to inflame an already sort of nonsense situation, making it needlessly worse. All right, getting some needle like that, it doesn't really matter. He's a Liverpool fan, then fair enough. But I think you've been helped out, and that's the sort of nonsense that I don't get. Players are supposed to be standing up for each other in that kind of situation because it's the system of the decision making that's the problem. That player's actually helped you out there. All right, the initial act of where he's got his hands on your neck, but that was necessary to be able to pull you up. Otherwise, you would have fell back. And then it ends with a cuddle. They end with a cuddle. You can see that he's absolutely fine. And
Will Hughes' face. Hughes' face was not somebody who was being strangled. Because if someone's doing that round the throat, you are going to panic and you're going to maybe do something silly. You might swing an arm. He had it round him, but he wasn't in that kind of way. You look at Fred's face when with Ayew, and it's not a good look.
Yeah.
You could see Fred is like kind of react. He could have reacted at any time if someone had done that to him or was doing it to him, and he could have swung an arm or something. So that one for me is wrong. I haven't heard anything mentions ifs and buts and maybes whether or not they're going to contest it, but I think it's there. It's the wrong decision, and you've got to take every opportunity to take them to task at this moment in time. And I'll say it again. I've said it 1,000 times. They need help in there. They need help because, and I'll use the words again, it's a boys' club thing in there. It's a fact of life. It can't be helped. And now you might just need someone in there just to spice up and look get more independent there again, an ex-player. And then you might have to keep changing that player to get different things because we do get that way. We do suddenly get favoritism. We do sometimes not like something someone's done has made you irate, so you decide that you're not going to give them anything anymore. Yeah. And that's all going on. It happens. You can't say it doesn't happen because it's human nature. Yeah. So it has. So that is why that's come about. As far as I'm concerned, it was totally wrong, but they went and done that.
I find funny is that they used to say about the stuff that Casemiro does. Although I don't see him as a sort of cynical player in the way that Fernandinho was, because people would sort of credit Fernandinho for the tactical fouls and stuff like that. Casemiro's too good for that. He wins tackles, but I think there's been the kind of narrative. Yeah, all right. The tackle at Palace was bad, and I happen to agree. There's a decent shout for him to be sent off there, but he's not an aggressive player in that he goes out to hurt someone. He's normally good, but I think there's probably been that narrative of trying to paint him like that, and that was probably in Mariner's mind when he goes to send him off, which is just ridiculous. But I go back to the point that I make about the appeals panel. They're probably going to be looking at that saying their response probably would be along the lines of 2 wrongs don't make a right. So it doesn't matter about the Fred incident. That's the referee missed that. It's all about, was he wrong to send Casemiro off?
No, but Wayne, the thing is now that we now open a door now for what's been seen previous can be brought back and looked at.
Yeah.
The doors because of VAR and that now, so it doesn't make any difference. They can go back, look at that, and they can tell him he made a mistake. And you watched him. Well, you watch his manner when it was all going on. I don't mean get involved in it. Don't go in there. Start the assistant referee seemed like he was involved, but I think he was more panicking about being knocked further down the slope. But he should have just gone around a little bit and just had a look, just make out as if he was about and he was doing his job, because he just stood back there and it was kind of, oh, that's doing that. If you could see his face, it's like he just switched off, kind of virtually saying, oh, it's all right, we got people in the studio who can watch all that for me. I'll let them get on with it and make a decision and I'll just do it. Yeah. And that's what the problem is. VAR is taking away that zest from referees. They're not sharp anymore because they know there's something that's going to back them up. And again, that's human nature. You've got something there that is kind of allowing you maybe not to go 100% to go and do something because someone's going to make up the difference in what you've missed and not done properly. You're going to go and grab it. And I think that's what he's gone and done now. And there's a lot of referee doing it now. Then I saw one the other day when there was a foul and the referee hadn't seen it, and then all of a sudden the referee blew his whistle and he's given the foul. And it wasn't because he allowed play on because it went the other way. It's because someone told him in his ear there was a foul there. So I know that is going on. I don't know if that's right or wrong. But in certain ways, it's quite good. In other ways, it's quite wrong. But there's people still in their ear talking, oh, that's a foul. And they might have been just saying it because they're watching the game. Like sometimes when I'm commentating, I sometimes get involved in the game and I kind of get whatever. I forget. So I think these people, because they forget maybe to switch it off, whatever, oh, that's a foul. And the referee goes, oh, okay, bang.
Yeah.
Rather than making their own mind up and saying, God, I missed that. I've got to carry on now. Hopefully this ain't going to mug me off. This is going to come out the good boy. But they do that and all straight away you go, someone's talking their ear. Someone is helping them out do their job. In certain ways, that's quite good. But in a lot of ways, it could come back and bite them.
Yeah, like Ben says, exactly, Paul, VAR should be a referee aid. But the way it's been implemented has made it an extra referee. And it's also like the weird sort of ambiguity over things. Like, was it Clattenburg or Webb came out and said, well, on like Friday, actually came out and said, oh, well, we've changed the interpretation. So if Rashford scored that goal against City, if he scored the same goal this week, Bruno scores the same goal this weekend, then it's not going to count. Do you know? So they've said, oh, the interpretation of that's wrong. So they in theory, on the principle of it, I agree with you in terms of saying we should appeal it because we need to make a stand on that. It's at least to let a full incident be played out so you can see from start to finish what it actually looks like and maybe get a different angle of it. But I just feel with United's luck with that kind of thing and how key is, that I don't have any trust in the appeals process for that. Well, a couple of comments in. Robbie says, happy heavenly birthday to his uncle Desi Byrne. He moved to Manchester from Dublin in '63, travelled everywhere to see United and put many a lad up from Dublin when heading over for a match to Old Trafford. Yeah, there were many stories of that from lads from Ireland who travelled over. Robbie also says, thanks for your thread on the Busby Babes. No, really appreciate that, Robbie. We'll be talking about Munich in a moment. But I talk, first of all, hang on, Ben does say about Casemiro, one last point. It is risky. We should be able to beat Leeds and Leicester without him on paper anyway. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's not just Casemiro, it's Casemiro and Eriksen, and both of them out of the side. It does make relatively, I'm not going to say straightforward wins against Leeds and Leicester. I don't mean that, but games that are more comfortable than Manchester City at home, for example, it does throw it into the chaos theory because, well, let's be frank about it, United's midfield, even though Sabitzer did all right on Saturday, it's a bit of a risk. And I mean, is that where you're coming from when you're saying the appeal? You've got to really say, like, disregard this on paper theory. You've got to really go for it and put that appeal in to make sure that, well, to do everything that we can to get him available.
I think so. I think it's worth it. I mean, all of a sudden you say, okay, it's about League Cup, and yes, it is important. I think for the club, for Ten Hag, and for a lot of those players to be involved, the opportunity to some of them to win their first trophy. And I think they need it and understand that yes, they've won that trophy. Then it's important about then going to get the next trophy, and they need to understand to get that back, that kind of feeling that when you play for Manchester United, it is about winning games of football and winning trophies, not just as it had been previous. Well, I've got a Manchester United tracksuit and walk around and saying, look at me, and you haven't done anything. And there's a lot of players like that at United who haven't done anything, haven't achieved anything, but we're still walking around as if like playing for United was enough. It's only enough when you've actually won trophies because people won't be interested in you as a person if you haven't won trophies at Manchester United during your time, sorry. So, yes, the League Cup's important, but I think, as you said there, Ericsson and Casemiro make out for those for 3 games to get at that point, because they've both been integral in everything that since Ten Hag's been there. So you can't just turn around and, in my opinion, give that up so easy. Yes, there's a signing on loan who's coming on loan and looked very good when he come on. Yeah. But it's about, is he going to be able, him playing with Fred going to work for 3 games? We don't know. I don't believe it would work with McTominay, not at all. And I think a lot of fans now would totally agree with that now, that partnership isn't going to work. So you're looking at Fred and, to coming out and then him to play 3 games, in that kind of, well, you can't do a Casemiro role. So I think it's something worth, just because you look at the games, they are winnable games. They're games that they need at this time, given over this period as well. And you win those 3 games, and it makes it, it's important 3 games to stay in the hunt or to pull away in that pack of 4 to get a bit of security underneath.
Yeah, it's crazy. 3 games, it might not seem like a lot in isolation, but it is, like, for the momentum of this season, particularly at this moment with Arsenal having the little wobble in the weekend that United have had. You never know what position they could be if they win those 3 games. And it might be the making of some of those players. Just one last comment on Casemiro, because we got a comment in. The problem with VAR, says T2 the Izzo, is that the ref never changes his mind after being called to the screen. Someone in a shed decided that Casemiro should walk. Yep. We'll come on to the games against Leeds then. Strange because we're going to be playing them back to back, because obviously the home games rescheduled from when the Queen passed away earlier in the season. So we've got Leeds back-to-back games. I mean, you had something similar back in 91-92 where it was just Leeds all the time. And I know from what we've talked about previously, where you've kind of said, well, you looked a bit confused there, Paul. The cup games that we were playing at Ellen Road all the time.
Yeah, I mean, didn't we play them 3 times in 10 days? Something like that. Yeah.
But when we've talked previously, we've kind of said, like, the Leeds are the kind of team that you want to play once in a while because you never look forward to playing them again or playing in front of their fans. So, and not because they're, like, particularly atmospheric or anything like that, just because it's bitter and a bit horrible, and not precisely what United need after a bitter end to the way that the game finished on Saturday. What do you reckon? They lost yesterday at Forest. From what I actually saw the game, I saw the first half hour. They played quite well. I don't think they deserved to be behind, but they were behind. They forced the Kilo Navas into a few saves. Not all of the magnificent saves. They just forced him into a few. Is it a good thing that United are getting them back to back when they're on a bit of a poor run?
In certain ways, yeah, I would go with that, Wayne. To be perfectly honest, but again, Leeds. I mean, I'm gonna say it. They was unlucky, but there's been many a team got relegated from being unlucky.
Yeah,
Many a team, and it just seems that way. They started so well, and then they conceded a goal out of nothing, and then we didn't see Dave Johnson's boy Brendan again. That was him out of the game, disappeared. He's walked away with the honour of scoring a goal, but he disappeared totally out of the game. Leeds were the better team throughout, but they've got nothing at the top end, nothing at the top end at all. Want to play football all the time, everywhere and you can catch them out so many times because they overplay. The lad Strike, is it Strike? Playing
yeah,
on the
I think
left,
so.
playing on the left side. He, Leeds fans have been moaning about him for weeks, and the manager's still playing him. Just so many mistakes. Everything that happens on his side, his area. He's a calamity without a shadow of doubt. But those Leeds players will lift themselves. The home game going there. The Leeds players will lift because they have to, because otherwise they won't be accepted by their own fans. And as we know, it's a massive game for Leeds, and that's what
Yeah,
it's all about. It's a big game for Leeds. They'll come to Old Trafford, and it's a different kind of game. Yes, it's seen as a big game, maybe because of at Old Trafford, because what the grief and what some of the United fans have to put up with when they go there. But to Leeds, it's their be all and end all. It's the one that they waited for so many seasons to
mm,
play after being out of the Premier League, and I'm quite sure there's a lot of Leeds fans that don't want this game because generally, as they know now, since they've been back in the Premier League, it's not the game they look forward to because all they do is concede goals and not score any.
yeah,
So on that side of it, it's a great double header, I think, at this moment for United, and it's one that you're going to go into where you know that a lot of the players are going to be lifted for it, especially when they go to Welland Road and hear the hate, see the hate, feel the hate. I think I can say that as well.
yeah.
And I never witnessed anything like that until I went there. I thought, I think I said this before. I think, and I say it quite a bit because it's a fact. I got more abuse from playing for Manchester United at Ellen Road than what I did from being black. And it wasn't nice when I go in there when I played there for Fulham and for QPR. But I never realised it how nasty and volatile that game and vile that game was at Ellen Road until I went there in a United shirt. It
Yeah.
was incredible.
Well, United. If we are to be without Casemiro and Eriksen, the one thing I will say is that at least we won both games without them against Leeds last season. So we'll see.
Mm.
But we back to talk about those games for sure. We have to talk about Munich. Obviously, it's the 65th anniversary of it today. Um, when it's the big landmark years, I always feel like it's more not important because it's always important, but it's like because it's an anniversary, and you think with every sort of 5 years that passes, then it's kind of like more people have passed in that meantime, and who survived. And I think there's only Bobby Charlton who survived from Munich who's still alive now. I know that one of the air stewardesses is still there, but I mean, I, it's always a sort of soberingly emotional day for United supporters. You came into United not as a youth player; you were someone who was signed from the outside, so you were a senior pro. Well, many years in the game, played at Old Trafford many times before you actually represented the club. So, how did Munich affect you as a United player? How long after joining the club did you start to feel what it meant to the club?
I mean, it was mentioned quite early. Obviously, I knew about it, but I never knew how strong it was at the club until I was actually playing for him. It was always mentioned. There was always something that there was always a relationship, something that would bring it on and it'd be talked about. But that first time playing, playing when it was there, when in February, my first, I think that would have been '92.
Yeah,
and arrived, and you could feel it. You knew that it was something there that was always going to be there. Was remembered. Everybody, you could just see everyone. It put everyone on the low, to be perfectly honest. And the thing that you wanted to give, you wanted to lift it by a performance on the pitch, and that's what it was all about, really. Just to make sure that you delivered on the pitch, and it was important for those lads to get through that at the weekend as well.
Yeah,
After what's going on, so that all those little things play a part, and it's just as difficult for coming out and imagine as an away player as well at that moment to play in those circumstances as well with you know 65, 70,000 odd people who are mourning, maybe one of Manchester United's greatest ever teams,
yeah.
all being lost in that fashion. So, it was tough times as a player, and it's still something now. Which, when it does come around, because it does always fall on like my best mate's birthday as well. So I definitely won't forget that. What that day means as well.
It's one thing witnessing it from the stands. The second thing is actually playing in it, and that's why I'm looking to talk to you about this. I remember, Ten Hag said about Rashford's goal that it was good that we played in that Busby spirit. Like that it was movement, it was good passing, and we score a nice goal, and it's from an academy player, so it's nice to score like that. I'm sure there's plenty of people who'll be watching or listening to this, Paul, who remember the atmosphere after, and it's not attached to the Munich disaster, but the atmosphere after Sir Matt died, and we played against Everton, and it was so surreal. And afterwards, there was kind of like the responsibility that we had to go out and put on a show. You have that responsibility anyway, playing for the club. You've got to go out there and play well. Does it? How does that change when it is an event like that? Is it like yeah, you've got to win a game of football in the league program, but is it like almost like an extra emphasis? Like we've got to play well here. We've got to play entertaining football.
Yeah, when you play for Manchester United, that's the way it is anyway. But when you've got a manager as well who demanded that you entertain, yes, he definitely demanded that you win, but he demanded that you entertained as well. The boss just wasn't about going through them. Just get a win. That's important. He wanted a performance, and he used to use the word that befitted Manchester United.
Yeah,
Many a time we used that word when we hadn't,
yeah,
and we paid for it. But on, the game you're talking about, one of them was like Everton, and Everton arrived there, and that moment, in a situation as well, and I think it was that kind of time, and it was a tough moment for them as well as players, and it was players talk about it after. They talk about that playing, and they don't feel they can go 100% because they feel as if they're treading on the wrong turf. They shouldn't be there. You know, United should play against United that day.
yeah,
They should maybe change it to just have a friendly game that day. That have the weekend off. I think the way it is.
yeah,
But it was difficult, seriously difficult for the players because and Ten Hag again is saying things, and I don't know whether the boss has whispered in his ear, but he seems to be he seems to be working off a similar template to the way the boss was about most things
yeah,
and the way he manages. And I'll say it again, he's the first manager that Manchester United have had since 2013. And that's proven a point by the way that United are performing and the way he's conducting himself as well. And he's taken everything on board about the club. And I've seen other managers do that because it's there, but I can see it more. But he's genuine about it as well. It's
yeah,
there. He's grabbed it straight away. And just by the way the boss is, and it'd be interesting if the boss was the same way when he first around. But two things that we all knew that about when you played for Manchester United is you didn't disrespect the club, and you certainly didn't disrespect your teammates.
yeah.
And they're important things.
Yeah. So yeah, obviously it's the 65th anniversary. There are so many different stories to Munich that are attached to Munich, which are they're harrowing. They're inspiring in a certain way. I mean, obviously you've got the passing of the players: Jeff Bent, Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Duncan Edwards. Mark Jones, David Pegg, Tommy Taylor, Bill Whelan. You've got the staff, Tom Curry, Walter Crickmer, and Bert Wally. I mean, even Walter Crickmer, learn about the history that he had with the club, how important he was to setting up the youth system at the club, and how long he worked for the club. You've got Willie Satinoff, the support who travelled, who was probably about to be appointed to the board. All the players who succeeded the players who had to come into the side afterwards, the players who didn't play again, but Jackie Blanchflower, Johnny Berry, the players who had this incredible weight on them, like Kenny Morgans, who just weren't able to perform to the standard, which because they had such liberation and freedom before the disaster, and they were still haunted by it afterwards. Players like Harry Gregg, his heroism on the day, even that is just a complete story in itself. The things that those players went through. Matt Busby being read the lad's last rites twice, and surviving. Jimmy Murphy going to visit him and deciding that he was going to pull the club out of that wreckage and continue to compete in the same manner in which the club had competed before. Then the passing of Duncan Edwards, which came two weeks after the disaster, and plunged the club into a whole different sort of thread of mourning. And then the players who came after, the likes of Alex Dawson and Mark Pearson, who had to come in and miss an important part of their development to come into the first team, and the weight of responsibility that those players carried for the next 2 or 3 years, that basically sacrificing a career at the top just to stand in for that 2 or 3 years. I mean, those players never won medals, and they deserve something much greater than that because what they put in for the club. It's just an incredible moment in United's history that, in terms of like the size of it, I'm talking about in terms of it being incredible, that you have to stop every year, but especially on the landmark years, because I think you go like 5 or 10 years, and then there are these number of people who pass in it's almost like mini generations of people who've passed away and mini generations of people who've been introduced to it. It's more important with that passing block of time that the younger generation are educated about what those players stood for. And I mean, you were lucky enough, Paul, to have rubbed shoulders with many of the survivors. You would have met so many of them. You would have known the kind of character that they had and the kind of humility that they showed. And Bill Foulkes and Bobby Charlton won European Cups 10 years after the disaster. You know what I mean? That kind of responsibility. Obviously, a complete generation has passed since then to make that alien for today's players, that they don't have. I'm not criticizing. That's just what time gives. Like, it's, I don't know. It's almost like it's an incredible psychological kind of dilemma. Is it a burden? Is it an inspiration? I mean, I just ask you before we close off, Paul. Is it a burden? Does it feel like a burden? Does it feel like an inspiration when you're pulling on that shirt, knowing what those players sort of not sacrificed, but because it wasn't a sacrifice, but what those players went through and what they gave? Does it make it more of a burden, or does it make it more of a privilege?
I'm going to turn around and say a privilege, to be perfectly honest, to actually play. And then it's even more of a privilege, or the fact of you can go there and you can achieve as well when you're there. And if you go and achieve, that makes it even better, because then you know that you've done it right. You've earned your stripes by being involved in something successful with the club. The club's always going to be seen in that light, but the light gets even brighter every time they go and win a trophy. It's as simple as that, and it's about keeping that light going, and that's why there's an opportunity, definitely on 2 counts, to go and win a trophy. Yeah. I think it's got to be grabbed.
Yeah, he's couple of comments to close on. Robbie says, I think we found a gem in Ten Hag. And Ben says, you can tell he's immersing himself in Manchester United. It's not just for a photo opportunity or because he's been asked to do it. Absolutely. And I think that's a nice sort of way to end the podcast, in sort of acknowledging that about Ten Hag, is that it's not a gimmick for him. You can tell that it really is something that's important to him, and that he has, as Ben said, immersed himself in it. that's it for this week, guys. We'll be back next week to talk about the games against Leeds. That should be an eventful double-header, to say the least. If you're watching live on YouTube, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're listening back on the audio podcast, be sure to give us a review and subscribe on the platform you're listening on. We'll be back next week, guys, so stay safe and stay well. Thanks for listening and watching.